Welcome and hello. We are the Facebook Live with the Horticulturists here to answer your gardening questions today. It's been at least a couple weeks since we've been on here, so hopefully there's a lot of questions that you guys need answered for your garden. My name is Candice Hart. I'm the Illinois State Master Gardener Specialist, so I run and coordinate the Master Gardener program for the state. And I've got with me two other great horticulturists. You guys want to introduce yourselves?
My name is Kelly Allsup, and I'm an educator based out of Bloomington. I love talking about insects and pollinators and beneficial insects and bad insects and good insects. Any insects. Fascinated by insects for some reason.
Awesome. Cool.
I'm Ryan Pankau, a horticulture educator here in Champaign-Urbana, and I guess my specialty would be trees and shrubs and woody vegetation is what most of my training is in and what I like to talk about the most, but I also do a lot of vegetable gardening and a lot of stuff with natives and more restoration ecology type stuff is a big interest of mine as well. So
very cool. And flowers are kind of my thing. Annuals, perennials, cut flowers. That's tend to be what I grow the most. So between the three of us, I bet we can answer almost any question you might have. So if you have a gardening question, put it into the comments there and we will address those as we go through today. But I think we're going to start off with Kelly. She had a couple things just kind of going out in the garden right now that she wanted to talk about to kick us off. So what do you got, Kelly?
I think it would be a fun challenge to stump the horticulturist and ask us a question that we won't be able to answer.
Hey, yeah, go for it. Let's see what we get.
Where we're like,
keep it appropriate.
Yeah. You might get us in trouble here.
So, I have been, like Ryan, I don't feel like I'm an expert in vegetable growing, but I love growing vegetables at my house. I do a lot of containers, but I have been assisting a community garden called Sunnyside in West Bloomington, and we have been doing some tomato trellising lately. And so we've done 3 types of trellising. We did, just the traditional baskets that you can buy in a garden center, and which were easy to put on and fairly cheap. Then we also did a basket weave method where we put in a T-post every 3 plants, and then we used nylon string and we interweaved it throughout the tomato plants, and that method is fairly cheap besides the cost of the T-post, and it's what most tomato producers do. But it's something that every 12 to 18 inches I'm going to have to go back and do a basket weave every 12 to 18 inches. I do, but ultimately it creates a hedge of tomatoes. Now you have to have 6 tomato plants for this to be something that's efficient for you. Mm-hmm. Then the third method was we made giant tomato columns out of sheep fencing. And we used zip ties and a T-post for 2 baskets. And this has proven to be very laborious.
To make them.
Yes. And more expensive than any of the other methods. However, I'm done with that. I don't have to go back to it. It's done. I just have to.
That's nice.
I have to pick my tomatoes, and that's it. So even though there was more cost and labor in the beginning, I have to see, how this is gonna benefit me. So I predict that the traditional tomato baskets will not make it throughout the summer. They will be on the ground. I will be stepping on tomatoes. We will have rotten tomatoes. And we won't get as much produce.
Because they're just not sturdy enough, you think?
Right.
They don't have enough weight to them to support.
Especially since we're growing indeterminate tomatoes, which means they keep growing their vines and they keep growing and they don't stay shorter. So I predict them to fall down on the ground. Mm-hmm. And, in the past, I'm sure every tomato grower has had this where they've had every intention to have this beautiful shrubby tomato and it went halfway
So
during the season.
Maybe you said this, but just to be clear, you're talking about like the wire basket you buy at
Just
the hardware
the cheap,
store or
kind
whatever.
of basic tomato cage,
that
basically,
probably
right?
all of us have used if you've ever grown tomatoes.
Yeah, and Matt showed him an image of it.
Oh,
so,
okay, we have an image.
Perfect.
So, and then the basket weave, I just predict a little bit more labor than the labor throughout the season versus in the beginning of the season. But we also did our pinching, and that was, I talked about that in the last episode where we pinch out the suckers. So we pinched all the suckers, so that's not going to be a variable in the experiment. And we're actually going to weigh the tomatoes at the very end to see if, and do all the cost accounting and to see if any method produces more tomatoes than the other.
And it's all the same type of tomato plant? Same
Yes.
varieties?
Well, I have 3 varieties down the same
Cool.
treatments.
Nice.
Yeah,
So
very cool.
That'll be
I do
interesting.
predict the basket weave to be, and the sheep gate fence
Fencing.
tomato cage to produce more tomatoes than the traditional. But we'll see. And then I'll do the cost accounting and see, what a homeowner wants to do. And then the sheep one, it lasts season after season.
Yeah, you can reuse it.
However, I don't know
others.
about you, but most people may not have that kind of storage
True.
space.
Yeah.
So those 30 cages will probably be in my garage this winter.
Gotta go somewhere.
So, stake your tomatoes. Regardless of what system you use, keeping tomatoes up off the ground so you're not stepping on them, so they're not rotting, so you're not having as many disease issues. You can see the insect pest issues. It's just stake your tomatoes. And we usually do it at time of planting, but if you haven't staked your tomatoes and you've already planted them, you still have time.
Yeah.
No, we've all done that.
Oh, yeah.
Staked later because you had to, but
You gotta.
yeah,
It
really
works.
getting the airflow to the foliage, I think, is a huge factor in all the diseases, or the main ones that affect tomatoes. So staking is a part of that. Pruning is a part of that. But you really will see a difference if you can get that airflow.
And I wrote a news release with more details on our website for McLean Extension.
Yeah, I'm curious to see how this turns out, especially that basket weave. I think
I know.
that would be probably the best. But you're right, the labor. You got to figure out, is it worth the extra?
Well, I don't know.
Because every couple weeks, are you gonna be doing that? You think, or how often?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it depends
How
on
much
how
they grow.
it grows.
Yeah.
So I don't know, man. I'm getting tired of building those sheep. The sheep.
But once
fence.
they're built,
You're right, and they're
done,
beautiful.
So that's always
Yeah,
good.
I'm really excited to see the results. That'll be interesting to have some numbers to put with it and help folks make decisions for their garden. I know when I've done the basket weave, it has seemed like I've messed with it all summer. But you're out there doing stuff anyway. It's not like it's hours and hours. You're dealing with that.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just something to pay attention to.
I'm not going to do it scientifically, but I am going to make disease observations also.
Oh, very cool. So we'll have some great results from that later
Yeah,
in summer.
I'll be able to make a handout.
Awesome. Very cool. Cool. Well, if you guys have any gardening questions, keep them coming into the comment box. We've got one question so far about maples, so let's go ahead and take a look at that one, and then we can see what else Kelly had on her list today. So Tiffany messaged us. She's interested in finding out what's wrong with her trees. She has 3 maples. She thinks they're Norways. 2 have been hit with whatever the stuff is, and I have a couple pictures from her. The 2 are actually set to be cut down this Saturday. Her question is, should she be worried that whatever these 2 have will transfer to the 3rd maple that looks healthy? Should I go ahead and cut down the 3rd that looks healthy? And then, so here, sorry guys, you won't see the pictures because she messaged them to us, but she sent us some pictures of the bark, basically, and it's got some, looks like some wounds in it that have healed over. There's a lot of rot happening around the base. I'll let Ryan take a look.
He's the expert.
He's our
First
tree
of
guy.
all, Norway Maple is an invasive species, so I say cut it down.
I can only get to one picture
sorry,
there, but I can tell a lot from the one picture.
Good.
One really common problem with Norway maple are girdling roots or soil issues. I think that's probably what some of your problem has stemmed from is just not a healthy root system on one side of the tree or the other. That some of the girdling roots and all the root issues that Norway maples have, originate from planting too deep. That's one of the issues.
Yeah, you don't see much of a root flare on.
Yeah, and Candice, that's the first thing that I look at when I'm looking at a tree trunk at the ground is I try to see that nice basal flare that most tree trunks have. Where in this case I don't really see that. I see a pretty straight trunk going into the ground. A lot of folks compare that to a telephone pole going into the ground. And that tells me that root collar area that should normally have a nice flare there hasn't developed properly on this tree. And that's really what we found in just the last few decades of research and things in the field of arboriculture is that root collar zone is really important. It's a really important transition between roots and trunk tissue. And so there's just a lot of disorders that happen there related to improper root structure, I guess, of the tree, you might say. So I mean that's what I would maybe attribute that to. And I don't know that it's any consolation to you, but I've had two in my yard that have had similar problems.
Yeah,
I've cut one
I have
down.
one actually that I just got an estimate for the other day that it's been just slowly declining. It's one of the purple leaf Norway ones, just been slowly declining for several years. And
so now, to answer your question as, is it going to spread to my other tree? Is it, something that can spread, or is it going to be a problem? No, I don't think so. Unless there's verticillium wilt involved. And
that's what I suspect mine might be. I haven't cut. One thing you can do with verticillium wilt is you can cut a sample, cut it at a cross section of one of the branches and see if you can see like dark discolor. And I haven't done that yet, but I suspect mine might be that.
So yeah, verticillium wilt kind of starts as some dead limbs up in the canopy. And basically what's going on is a fungus is clogging the conductive tissue from the roots to those individual branches up there, and slowly over time it clogs it all and kills the tree. But it can be pretty slow, and in the case of my Norway maple, I know it had root issues. It already had a girdling root. I never actually found the dark coloration in the stems for verticillium wilt that would confirm that, like Candice described. But sometimes you don't see that when you do have verticillium
especially
wilt.
if the branch is dead or has been dead for a period of time.
So I really suspected that from the pattern it presented. It was early fall color on this tree, and there was some dead limbs up in the canopy, up in the tip tops, that made me really think verticillium wilt, and I observed it for 2 years. I went ahead and cut it down, but I have another Norway maple that is not looking great. It definitely has the same root collar issues, and it's probably about 30 yards away that I've left. And in my case, I was an arborist. I have chainsaws. I have things, I will probably cut it down myself at whatever time it comes down, but I guess the bottom line being, I really feel like if a tree is still providing shade, still somewhat healthy there and not presenting a hazard to a house or something that's underneath it that could be a target when it fell, I usually tend to wait as long as possible to cut them down. Back to the verticillium wilt issue, it's a soil-borne pathogen, so if that truly is what could have caused the death of your maples, then there's a whole list of species that are susceptible that if they're in close proximity could get verticillium wilt, or when you go to replant, you want to be really careful not to plant one of those susceptible species.
And the way that you can find out for sure if you have verticillium wilt is you can send a sample to the University of Illinois Plant Clinic. They'll, they want, like Candice said, they want dead and living tissue so they can see those symptoms and see that.
Yeah, so it looks like, Tiffany, your first two trees, they might be too far dead for that potentially. But that third one, if you start noticing similar symptoms, dieback happening, then I think that would be a good time to send it to the plant clinic and see what
Yeah, and,
See
and
what they can
Kelly's,
tell ya.
Kelly's right. That really is the only definitive
Yeah.
way to know
Yeah.
if you have it or not.
And there's no cure for verticillium wilt, correct?
No, there really isn't.
No. Replant with something more susceptible, yeah.
With
Yeah.
something
Or
not
less susceptible. Sorry, less susceptible.
We know what you meant.
Now you can help your tree. You can help nurse your tree along by watering it during time. Just your basic good health care for a tree.
Sure.
Mulching it, watering it, those kind of things can help. Extend the life of your tree. But probably if it is already in poor health and has symptoms of verticillium, well, it's probably going to be what causes its demise at some point. But.
Well, great question, Tiffany. I hope that helped, and I hope that you at least get a little bit more time out of that third Norway maple. I think so.
Don't plant another Norway maple.
Yeah, and maybe not even plant another maple. Too.
Right.
Look at what else you have in your yard and diversify if you don't have a lot of diversity. Okay, keep those questions coming into the comments here. Rosie has a question here. Her neighbor has where'd it go? Her neighbor has curled and almost dried leaves on their peach tree. Is this from the polar vortex? Assuming he won't get fruit, but is the tree itself damaged? So let's talk about peach.
Well,
that was one of the things we were gonna maybe touch on today. So
yeah, this was something I planned to kind of talk about. In Central Illinois, anyway, peach leaf curl has been really bad this year, and I suspect that's probably what your tree has. Another issue we've had is that nearly all of the peach crop in Central Illinois was aborted. The fruit buds were killed by cold temperatures earlier in the spring. Peaches flower very early. They come out of dormancy very early, so they came out of dormancy at a period in the spring where our weather was still cold enough that it could freeze those buds. So you're probably not going to get fruit on a peach tree this year in the central part of the state. I don't know about southern Illinois, but I know central and northern have had a lot of damage to any peach crop. But back to the peach leaf curl, it's a fungal infection that happens in wet springs. This spring has been particularly wet and bad.
Yep.
I think it was the week before last I had 3 reports of that in my office. So it really is happening widespread around the area.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, once the buds break on a peach tree, there's really no treatment for it. Once things dry up this spring, and they're starting to, you shouldn't see further infection. It's really that new succulent tissue that's going to, it's going to spread it all on. So shouldn't see new infections. You should see it slow down, but any leaf that's infected is probably going to, die.
Drop,
at least from what I've observed this spring, is going to drop, is going to die. It hurts the tree because that's the energy producing tissue of the tree, the leaves. Your peach tree is not going to get as much energy production out of the growing season this year. Again, just some of your basic health care for trees of watering those trees during the dry part of the year is going to be really critical this year for, trying to nurse it through this season. And thinking about next season, it may be a good idea to consider treating for peach leaf curl, and that happens over the dormant season. You
is that a dormant
spray the
oil?
buds.
Does that help with that, or is it different?
I think it's actually a fungicide.
Okay.
I would have to actually look that up, but I know the treatment is during the dormant season.
Good.
So, you can treat late in the fall after they go into dormancy or in the spring. But I think for a tree that had it really bad this year, I think I would consider treatment before next year, just so you don't have 2 years in a row.
And she says she's from northern Illinois, which we had a team meeting last week, and we were talking with some of our colleagues in the north. And I know he mentioned they've noticed a lot of fruit tree problems, partly because of that polar vortex, as it just got so cold that, because it's fairly common for a tree not to flower because the flower buds get killed off. But he was saying even some of the trees themselves are being killed just because of those really cold temperatures. So
yeah, I've seen some dieback in central Illinois. I kind of wonder. I mean, not fully dead trees. But
it's hard to say for sure, but more than likely, yeah. So. Yeah, I would just tell your neighbor to kind of keep an eye on things and think about if it does look like peach leaf curl, maybe treating that next year.
Yeah, another big point to think about is although you really wouldn't want to fertilize any peach tree that suffered from that because that's going to potentially cause a flush of new growth that could then again be reinfected. But so just kind of watering and nursing it through this year. And just knowing that, like, once it gets hot and dry, we really aren't going to have much more of an issue with that. You may see it leaf out again as well once it dries up and we don't have issues.
Keep an eye on things. Awesome.
Yeah.
Let's see. Great questions coming in. Daniel Ray asked if we're going to have this opportunity again, and yep, we definitely will. We do this every couple of weeks, so you can always join us next time with other questions. Kathy is familiar with our I-Pollinate program that we've mentioned before. Kelly, can you touch on that a little bit again, how people can participate in the I-Pollinate project?
Yeah, actually we are coming close to the final deadline to put in your garden, but there is an I-Pollinate website, and they have a webinar on there where the scientists are telling you exactly what they want to see and how we do it. So what you do is you have a little pocket garden, and you plant 6 of the 10 options, I think, that Dr. Harmon Threet decided to do research on. And they're ornamentals that we grow all the time anyway, stuff like marigolds and zinnias and lobelia and pentas, which I love pentas. But then she 4 times this year, in a 1-week period, the 4 times, you're going to make observations. And all you have to do is go bee, fly, butterfly, other, and it's really quite simple. I know you guys are saying simple, but once you discover the difference between bees and flies, then it can be easy because a bee is fuzzy, they have 4 wings. However, it kind of doesn't always look like they have 4 wings because they kind of connect their wings together. But a fly is usually more shiny. You can see 2 distinctive leaves.
Wings.
And
compound eyes.
And then, butterflies and moths and others are simple. And then you want to also plant the 4 small swamp milkweeds and then do the observations on the eggs and the monarch larva. And so I just, we uploaded a shopping guide onto the website yesterday. Cool. And I'm going to send out some more instructions to the people who have registered their garden on how to make those first observations so they feel comfortable on making those.
Cool. So if they just Google I-Pollinate, that website should come right up. And you can sign up on there.
And of course, Erin is adding that to the comments right now.
Absolutely. Then you don't have to Google.
But that actually, let's see how fast Matt can keep up with me. That actually triggers my next topic, which I'd love to talk about, the Hoverfly. I know, I'm from the South, called the Hoverfly. And it is everywhere right now. A lot of people think it's like a sweat bee because it likes to be around people, but but the population kind of skyrockets in late June or in July. But it is a great big pollinating fly, not big, and then its larva is an aphid-eating maggot.
Pretty good deal out of that.
So not only is it an amazing pollinator. But it also will help eat up all the aphids in your garden or anything smaller than itself. It will try to suck those up, eggs, smaller things. And it's very common. Every garden I go into, I see Hoverfly. And it's just a really cool insect. And this is probably most definitely going to be one of the ones you see. So check it out. It looks kind of like a bee, the coloration, but again, it's shiny and has 2 wings, and wonderful for your garden.
Yeah, we were at an arboretum in Rockford last week, and what was the plant? I don't remember.
Forget-me-not?
Oh, yeah, it was forget-me-nots, and they were just everywhere. They were buzzing all over that stuff, yeah.
And I saw them like early in the season. because I was teaching a garden insect class, and so I put out, those yellow sticky cards that people use sometimes to track flying insects. We put out the yellow sticky cards, and there was just hoverflies all over them. And of course, you don't want to, kill the hoverflies, but I know they're there now.
Yeah, you're monitoring.
I know that I have beneficial insects in the garden. I know I have pollinators in the garden, so
that is good.
Good
so
to know.
Keep an eye out. That was a really good one to look for. Awesome. Keep those questions coming into the comment box there. Maureen states here she's noticed that she has bright orange roots on various plants in her garden. So, example, hydrangea and some other plants. And that's kind of all she said. But I'm guessing she wants to know if that's normal to have kind of bright orange roots on plants, or that's a problem, if that's something going on.
I don't know. The bark tissue on roots often looks a little different than that of the tree or shrub. I'll definitely say that. But I can't say from memory if my hydrangeas have bright orange roots.
I know.
Or
I
not.
can't think of.
Can't say it's
any
something I notice
either.
on them a lot. So,
yeah.
But at the same time, I can't think of a problem or pathogen to correlate that with either.
Most of the time, if you've got roots that are damaged or struggling, they tend to be dark in color.
Yeah.
Like, on most plants, a healthy root's typically kind of a white, big, fleshy root a lot of times. And if you have a root rot pathogen or some other root soil disease, they tend to become darkened when they're not very healthy. But yeah, orange, you don't.
So hurry up and go take a picture real quick.
Yeah, send us a picture. That's always, and let us know what plant it is, and we can find out if that's normal or not. Because
okay, she won the award.
Yeah, we stumped.
She stumped the horticulturist.
We just need more information.
We're like bright orange roots.
It sounds pretty.
Can we grow this plant?
It sounds lovely. So yeah, message us some pictures, Maureen, if you have them, and let us know what plant it is, and see what we can find out. Let's see. Tiffany has another question. Will arborvitae roots hurt a retaining wall? They're thinking about planting a small line for privacy, but don't want to hurt the retaining wall. They'd be roughly 5 to 6 feet back. Any other ideas for privacy? Thanks.
I don't think I'd worry about it too much.
No.
I think one good practice when building a retaining wall is to have a nice, well-drained area right behind the wall where all the soil's stacked up. And usually I accomplish that with some pea gravel or something that's separated from the soil with the fabric. So, you kind of have to have, if all your materials are piling in behind the wall, you have this little column of pea gravel with fabric around it to keep the soil from infiltrating it.
Okay.
And so what that does is provides drainage behind your wall and, just doesn't allow water to stack up behind it and potentially freeze and push the wall out in the winter or just have any drainage issues. But it also makes a more dried out environment that's going to be less, favorable for roots. So you aren't going to draw arborvitae roots into that area. So I think with that added, I would certainly install a retaining wall with arborvitae 4 or 5 feet off of it and not think twice about it. I mean,
and arborvitae is really, it's a fairly shallow rooted shrub. Like if we have a drought period, like in the drought of 2012, for example, we had a lot of dead arborvitaes because people didn't water them. So in my mind, they have a fairly shallow root system, so I don't see them causing too much issue either.
Very true. I kind of refer to that as a wimpy root system.
Really, you're not going to get big, heavy tap roots that are going to.
Yeah, fairly shallow, fairly wimpy root system. If you did start to have problems, I mean, it would be. If you were really concerned about this down the line, it's pretty easy to go along and root prune on the wall side of those arborvitaes, and all you do with that is just take a shovel and gouge it down into the ground and kind of chop those roots. I mean, as long as your arborvitae are healthy and you don't think you're disturbing roots too much, that's not a bad thing. But I don't think I would worry about it or do anything different than install the wall and put those arborvitae on it.
Yeah, I don't think I would either. Any other tips for privacy plants or any other suggestions?
Honestly, arborvitae are just about my favorite for making that wall of evergreen vegetation. They really do a great job. The only thing I might caution you on is to really pay attention to what cultivar you get, because there are a million different cultivars of arborvitae, some of which can get really large, can get up to 30, 40 feet in mature height, some of which stay real small. So there's probably an arborvitae that will fit your situation perfectly, But just pay attention to which one you do grab, because that's...
Yeah, really check your label. Make sure
I
it's
think
got the full size on it.
Yeah, you probably want about the 15-foot tall type that stays pretty columnar, so pretty skinny, and plant those pretty close so they grow together quickly. That's what my plan would be, but just kind of depends on what size you want. They've got everything from those columnar skinny ones to round globe type arborvitaes. It just depends on how tall of a visual screen you'd like. So.
Cool. Awesome. I hope that helps, Tiffany. We got an insect question for you, Kelly. Heidi says they have an overabundance of buffalo gnats in the Alton, Illinois area, I guess related to the Mississippi flooding. They're a big pain. Are they beneficial to anything? Anything good about buffalo gnats?
Something's eating them, right?
They're feeding something, probably, right? Or tips for avoiding them?
I would do the same thing with the mosquitoes. I would use the DEET to protect myself, because they do bite and they can be very annoying.
They get in your hair.
Yeah.
That's what I hate about them.
You know, I would have to look it up, but I'd almost, bet that they are useful in pollination. Because even mosquitoes are useful in pollination. Makes you love them a little bit more, right?
Does it?
But
I would guess, they feed aquatic organisms. They come from the aquatic ecosystem.
I'm sure a lot of fish and other things probably eat. Yeah.
Maybe even some other insects, maybe like dragonflies would probably eat them. But yes, I just actually did a tree walk with Candice and thought I was going to be carried away by the mosquitoes in northern Illinois.
It was pretty bad.
And we put on DEET several times, so it is just a really bad year.
Yeah.
People need to make sure that they do not have standing water around their properties, and they really need to protect themselves and their children, because they're coming after us. And
back to buffalo gnats. I had a lot. I used to live in southern Illinois for a number of years, and we had a lot of problems with them. We lived next to a stream, and it's really like that flowing stream with really clear, clean water that really causes a great hatch of buffalo gnats. I found that better than DEET maybe is the lemon smelling.
The lemon eucalyptus. The eucalyptus.
It maybe works a little better. And where we had a lot of problems is we had chickens, and those buffalo gnats would get on our chickens so bad that it actually killed some chickens one year.
Wow. Oh my goodness.
Get the buffalo gnats getting in their airwaves, and the chickens trying to get away from it and huddling together and suffocating. I mean, it was all kinds of problems. So I really looked into what you do to get rid of buffalo gnats. One of the things, like you kind of mentioned with mosquitoes, is any type of airflow or wind is going to stop them. So that's one thing I did, was put a fan in our chicken coop on the roost, and that really kept them off the chickens a lot.
Nice.
So for us on our deck, having a fan running was a way you could sit there and not be inundated by them. Or if you have a ceiling fan in an outdoor area, run that. But if you can generate some wind or sit in a windy spot or be in a windy spot, I think that helps quite a bit.
That's a good point, hop on the boat and just keep moving. Don't stop.
just keep moving.
Get on the river and keep going.
Don't they have population rises and falls?
Yeah, they don't last.
So it's not going to last forever.
I'm sure. Yeah, I don't know what their life cycle is.
I feel like it happens a little bit later for us in Bloomington. I felt like, last year it was more like in July, but I know when we were in Rockford, they were saying that they were dealing with those problems then.
Yeah. And I think it depends on the flooding conditions
weather,
too, obviously.
Well, I mean, I think it's safe to say once it gets super hot later in summer, they're going to be out of here.
Yeah.
They're going to be done with their life cycle.
There's going to be less water sources for them, and so they probably are beneficial to something. Almost everything is. So
everything's connected.
Yeah,
it's all an ecosystem.
Exactly. Okay, Aaron's asking, our dogs are digging holes in our yard. They're small, but they're noticeable. What do I refill them with, and do I need to plant grass seed, or let nature take its course? So usually about 8 by 10 inches or so in size.
I'd say grass would probably fill in pretty quickly.
Yeah, small enough patch of that size. Yeah.
At least for me, just being lazy, I think I probably would just add some soil back in and kind of let the grass just grow over it slowly.
Yeah,
it depends on how quick you want grass back.
Yeah, and if there's a divot, I would fill it up if you got a pile of garden soil somewhere or something, fill it up so it's flat and you're not going to trip in it or anything.
Yeah.
And then
you don't want a hole. You may want to fill it up a little extra full because then it'll settle a little bit. So As far as how to keep your dogs out of those holes, I don't know. I've had the same problem with my dogs.
Yeah, some just like to dig.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if your grass doesn't fill in, let's say over the summer, Aaron, then I would do some grass seed in the fall. We're kind of past the grass seed time now because we're getting too warm. But when we cool back down again in the fall, you could throw some grass seed on that.
Yeah, that's mostly why I was thinking I would just kind of put some soil back in and let it go at this point. But
Yep. Fill them up. Okay, let's see. What else do we have here? Kathy has a question about pests. What do I do about ants? She's got small ones that are coming into the house, especially the kitchen near the sink. And this is definitely a common question we'll get to our Master Gardener help desk. I've got ants in the kitchen. What do I do?
I wrote an article on ants in the kitchen. It's probably on my blog. But yes, I was getting them in my bathroom, and I was like, "What in the world? Why are they here?" But they are actually attracted to the moisture, and so I did all the organic things that you were supposed to do. Clean up your food, keep your dishes washed. Look for the nest. Did not have success in that. At another house, I actually found the nest in a compost pile.
Oh, wow.
But
nice. You just follow them back to where they're going, basically.
But and then the vinegar or the alcohol, where you kind of wipe down the trails so the scent is gone. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that works for like 20 minutes.
Mm-hmm. And they made a new trail.
That's true.
Just went around it.
So, and in my existing house, I think they're living in the house, in the walls. So I personally did not do anything but and they have gone away because now it's warming up. Mm-hmm. But you have to use those ant bait traps. Mm-hmm. And I don't know the name of all the chemicals that I listed in the article, but you can read the article.
Yeah, and Aaron posted it for us in the comments.
For more
of
that. But if one bait does not work, then you need to try a bait with a different type of chemical.
Active ingredient.
And I knew what I had. I had the odorous ants, because if you smush them and they smell like coconut, then you have the house odorous ants. So you can always take an ant to an extension office and have them identify it. But I would just personally experiment with the ant baits and look at that article and
I would
try one. And
that's what I do most of the time.
In my experience, I call the ant baits like highly effective.
Yeah.
I mean, they all are drawn to it. They take it back to their nest. It really works well. But I have had a type of ant that didn't respond to the bait and had to switch before. But I can't wait to get home and smell some of my ants. Well, I'm not an entomologist.
Oh,
I don't know
it's an ant.
It's big. If I have a good enough picture, I could possibly identify it for you. Obviously not off my head. I'd have to look at my research, but
I think the baits really work well.
Yeah, I do too.
And it's easy. You can put them under the fridge. You can put them kind of different places.
And they say you really have to find the nest, but good luck with that. Yeah. I think taking the insecticide back to the nest is the way to go. Mm-hmm. Have them.
Yeah,
kill off
and safer than having to spray.
Yeah, and then you can also spray around your house, but then you'd have to, either do that yourself and mess with chemicals or hire someone to do that. But
and you could kill something beneficial.
Yeah, you could.
Process.
Yeah. And ants are beneficial. They aerate the soil.
True.
And they help with organic matter, and they break down things.
Just
food for a lot of things.
Not in the kitchen.
Well, and the cleaning or just keeping your counters wiped totally clean with zero crumbs or anything. Yeah. They don't have a reason to necessarily be up on your counters then. And I mean, granted, they're probably somewhere else, but out of sight, out of mind sometimes. But that does help a lot initially with just kind of getting.
That's really, I think, how I got rid of them. I tolerated them for about a month. I was just super, super clean. Turned the fan on in the bathroom after showers, and that's...
Tried it out, yeah. Mm-hmm. Awesome. Great questions, everybody. Keep those coming into the comments. We've got a question here from Kristen that she said she's learning a lot, so that's great. Thanks, Kristen. Quick question. She said she must know Kelly.
Hi, Kristen.
What is eating my hostas? Ideas on control. So a picture would help, Kristen, but more than likely your
know.
biggest your biggest leaf eater of a hosta, if it's leaving holes in the leaves, it's probably a slug. Slugs are probably the biggest pest in a hosta garden. They're, of course, soil dwellers. They're going to be crawling on the soil, but then they will climb up the leaf, eat holes in your leaves, and then disappears, and you never know they were there. Unless you kind of pull back the mulch and look for them, you don't necessarily see them very often, but they like moist conditions. In a hosta garden, it's usually a nice, shady, moist smorgasbord for them. So a couple things you can do for slugs is you can actually kind of not mulch. You can pull back the mulch so they don't have a place to hide. They tend to kind of hide underneath different types of mulches. You can use baits. You can purchase baits that you can put out, or you can make homemade different remedies of baits. You can also diversify and mix some other things into the hosta garden that they're not quite as attracted to. But yeah, if you try a couple of those tactics, you'll probably reduce it a little bit. But when you plant a hosta garden, you just kind of expect you're going to have some slug damage.
And they have a lot of leaves. You could probably
you
out those leaves and
cut out the ones that don't look great and keep going on. Yeah.
Remember when we were in college and we heard about you put the tuna can with the beer at the surface level?
Yep.
Well, that is not a good control method.
Yeah, beer,
it's just really kind of
beer has always been a
you have it
antidote,
but it's not going to lure every slug out of your garden.
Yeah.
You're not going to find a
it would let you
tuna
know,
can full.
Yeah,
it might
let you know
let
that
her
you have
know
slugs.
that she has it. Yeah,
exactly.
But yeah, I always, when it comes to slugs, I always move out the mulch and redo it a little bit. And now you said plant other shade perennials. What's a favorite shade perennial that you would suggest she plant?
So many. I'm trying to think what I've started to kind of. I have a big shade garden in my backyard that I initially kind of built out in hosta because they were free. My mom had a lot of hostas I could divide, so there's a lot of hosta in there. But now that I'm kind of filling in, I'm mixing in some of the other things. So like coral bells or heucheras are great because there's a ton of different foliage colors you can mix in. Jacob's Ladder is a cool shade perennial with kind of blue flowers. Astilbes have great flowers on them. Some natives like
wild ginger.
Yeah, wild
really
ginger
cool
is a good foliage ground
It is a
cover.
good ground cover.
Columbine.
That's the one I was trying to think of. The name was escaping me. Columbine's great. So there's really a lot of stuff you can mix in, and the slugs are not as they don't eat those. They're not attracted to those. Yeah.
I like ferns a lot.
Yeah, ferns are
They
great
look
too.
really
Yeah.
natural. I mean, I don't think a ton of them are native necessarily.
Sure,
to Illinois. There are some natives you could plant, but it kind of provides the same look as a hosta of a lot of foliage.
Yeah.
You know, and it's kind of a feathery foliage compared to your,
it's a different
hosta
texture.
Foliage, it's a little different.
Texture. And also good tip, too, if you have deer, because deer love hosta. So that's another thing to kind of mix in some other stuff that the deer are not going to...
Try and hide your hostas.
No, that triggers Candice's show and tell.
It does, actually. That's
Candice and
nice
I
segue,
went to Missouri Botanical Garden last month, and we went crazy over this one garden.
This random favorite garden.
And so, go ahead.
Yeah, they called it a Stumpery garden, is what they call it. Basically, you're just taking old stumps or like root systems of trees, basically, and they're using them as kind of garden decor to create a Stumpery garden. And in this case, it was a shade garden. So they had, there was a very large, was it Zelkova? I can't remember what tree was in there, but they had a very large shade tree. And then they had just kind of mixed these really cool tree stumps in around there and then mixed it in with some awesome shade perennials. So they had some columbines. Those were those red flowers in there. There were a lot of hostas, epimediums, the wild ginger you mentioned. It was just a really cool mix of awesome kind of decor, natural garden decor, and cool shade plants.
I know, and it's like, I think people, when it comes to shade, they feel like there's probably not enough diversity, which
there's
we
less.
do.
There certainly is less than you
But
can do
what
for
a
sun.
way to add interest to your
Right?
garden
Throw
by
in some old
that.
stumps and
Yeah, I really like that.
it was really cool.
Yeah.
And some of them had mushrooms growing on them. It was just a really cool
I
idea.
mean, think of the
Like,
insect diversity.
I
you
know.
draw
Right?
in.
Yeah, and then you could support things
I could
growing
grow
on them.
I am like sitting here wishing I had somebody that was cutting down a tree.
Right?
But then I want the one with the flare. I don't want the telephone pole. I want the flare.
Yeah. So
And-
if you're ever close to St. Louis, Missouri Botanic Garden, it's just an awesome
Yeah, it was
place
just
to
a
visit. Really cool diversity of plants, and this just random small Stumpery garden is
Yeah.
our favorite of the whole
And we
thing.
actually we went with a friend of ours, and she also has done this before in her own garden, put stumps in it, and stalked her neighbors to steal their stumps when they put it out on the curb.
Yeah. Free garden decor. I love it. Awesome. Great question, Kristen. So check for those slugs. See what you got. Lynn has a question here. How do you get rid of Bermudagrass? Grass.
Not a turf
The
person.
one thing that's
I know.
not our
Did
thing,
we
right?
not say-
We asked someone to stump us. And
Do we not?
turf
We
grass
got
is
two
definitely
so
not
far.
our-
Orange
not our
roots and-
jam.
How do I get rid of
Bermudagrass.
what I love doing to get rid of weeds is, I know it's a long process, but I like cardboard and 2 or 3 inches of mulch on top. Just smother that. Not a big fan of spraying a bunch of chemicals just because they get into the environment, and we know regardless of whether it's an insecticide or an herbicide, these bees are picking it up because like May Berenbaum says, they're large fuzzy mops or something like that. That attract everything, regardless. So every chemical that's in the environment is somehow affecting the bees. So, with that being said, I mean, people still choose to use herbicides, and I agree there are some conditions to use an herbicide. For instance, with poison hemlock or poison ivy. But when it comes to just weeds, I like to smother them.
Yeah, and in the case of a Bermuda grass, it's going to be mixed in, more than likely, Leland. You're probably talking about Bermuda grass that's growing within like your Kentucky bluegrass or your other more ideal grasses. So herbicide-wise, you really couldn't use something for that because anything that's going to kill the Bermuda grass is also going to kill your other ideal grasses that you're trying to keep. So you're right that kind of starting over basically in an area might be the best way to do it. Smothering out or using a non-selective herbicide and killing off an entire area, and then this fall reseeding back in with an ideal. Yeah. Or if it's a small enough area, you could try to go through and kind of hand pull or tease out some of the patches, but that'd be a lot of labor.
Or you could turn it into a garden.
Yeah. And Lynn, if you check out, we have a whole website on lawns that our colleague Richard has put together called Lawn Talk. And I know he has some info on there about certain lawn weeds, so that might be a good place to check out.
Some of it kind of depends on what you want that area to be going forward. Are you just trying to get the Bermuda grass out of the rest of your turf and maintain turf grass? Or, in the case of what Kelly's talking about, that is a great way to plant a tree there, to go ahead and smother it with cardboard and
start a
mulch
new bed of something.
It's a little more labor intensive than Kelly's method, but I've been pretty effective with just about any grass, just digging in one shovel scoop and turning it upside down in the area, and then mulching over and planting a tree in there. And I mean, if you give it that flip, it really doesn't come back. Yeah. You do have to dig down about 6 inches or so to get all those grass roots and flip them. Yeah. But that's another way that's more mechanical, I guess, than anything.
Yeah, that is the method that I usually use to start new gardens. From turf to a new garden is to just dig up the...
Yeah. Dig it and flip it.
Yeah, or if you've got the time, smothering is
but sometimes you have just like bad weeds, like bindweed or something that you have to... you have to do something.
I really like the cardboard method. I've seen
I use that a lot.
Really effective, and I know a lot of folks worry about what's going to happen to that cardboard. Is it always going to be there? I mean, it disintegrates in no time.
Down for sure. Yeah.
But it's there long enough to block out the sun and let that kill anything that's trying to germinate, and let your other plants establish. So
Absolutely.
Am I allowed to ask a question?
Sure. We've got that was actually our last one. We got about 10 minutes left.
Speaking
so
of
keep 'em coming.
weeds, I have been weeding like crazy. Of course, my backyard is. I would never want anybody to look at my backyard right now because there are so many weeds that I haven't kept up. And but what is it me or have we had a bumper crop of maple seedlings?
oh yeah.
Yeah.
And what do you know what caused that?
It depends on the spring. So, like, if some years when the maples are flowering, we'll go to frost, and it'll kill off the flowers, and then we don't have a great crop of samaras, is what they're called. This year, apparently, they must have had a great flowering year. We didn't have any frost, and they were great.
Things line up climate-wise.
Yeah.
Tree fruit crops are cyclical, and it's a strategy for all that species to perpetuate itself by flooding its seed out there. So, yeah, in this area, like silver maples produced phenomenally this year. Actually, there's a point in the springtime where those silver maples were so full of the helicopters or the samaras, whatever you want to call them, that people were worried their trees weren't leafing out because all you could see was the fruit. And there's actually a point in these high mast years that a tree like a silver maple puts more energy into that fruit production at the expense of leaf production temporarily there in the spring. So for a while there, it was looking like some silver maples weren't really leafing out and they were just littered with fruit. But now they've caught up. They've leafed out.
Sure.
All those fruits have dropped, and they are all over the place, sprouting up in my gardens. The nice thing, right now, you can just pull them out.
Yep.
I mean, it's
Yeah,
just
they're
a
easy to
quick
pull. Well, and we also had a lot of moisture, so it was ideal kind of germination conditions this spring, too.
Oh, yeah,
so.
they really hit the mark this year.
It's been crazy.
Yeah, I just went through I have some native plants and some, like a hydrangea and a fothergilla, and I just went through and pulled out all the maple seedlings and put mulch on to try to deter the rest of the maple seedlings from germinating, because if I had to pick up every single maple seedling, I'd be there forever.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I mean, I've been constantly walking around just pulling them right and left as I'm walking around.
And luckily in the lawn, it's pretty easy. You just mow them off and they're done. But in the landscaping, it's a pain.
And the gutters.
Yeah, make sure you clean out your gutters. Yeah.
You know, another shade tree I was going to maybe talk about if we had time earlier that's had some issues this spring are the sycamores. And I don't know if folks have noticed that. I mean, there's some in northern Illinois we just saw last week that were still barely leafing out.
Yeah.
And so it's been a wet spring. It's promoted a lot of different disease issues, and anthracnose on sycamore is kind of the explanation for this. The infection occurs during the springtime when it's really wet and rainy, and as soon as it gets dry and hotter out, we aren't going to have any further problems with anthracnose. And sycamores usually leaf out again or send out more leaves or fully develop their canopies, starting about now, really, in central Illinois. So not a big issue to worry about. Not obviously isn't helping out your sycamore, but as long as it's able to leaf out this year, it should be fine. And unless we get several years of this in a row, it really is something that sycamores have just always lived with.
It happens a
a
lot. They're used to that.
I don't know if I've ever seen a sycamore without anthracnose.
No.
Because they all have those little witches' brooms.
Yeah, we were at the Arborvitae last week, and there was a newly planted, super healthy sycamore, and we almost didn't know what it was. It was
so full of leaves.
It was so good looking. It was crazy.
So happens every spring. Just some years are worse than others. There's a really good article about it in the Home, Yard, Garden, and Pest newsletter that Travis Cleveland wrote, I believe, in the last edition, where he really explains it well. So if you want to learn more about it, sycamore anthracnose, and what it means, what it does, that is just a great, excellent resource.
Yeah, and if you guys aren't aware of the Home, Yard, and Garden Pest newsletter, we'll get a link put in. You can sign up for that to get that emailed to your inbox every 2 weeks, and it's really great way to stay on top of like what's happening in the garden. It's kind of central Illinois focused, but if you're in northern or southern, you can kind of base it on 2 weeks later I'll probably see this in northern Illinois, but what kind of disease, pests are happening. It's a really good way to stay up to date on kind of what's happening.
Cool. Yeah, they try and include the disease of the week, so to speak.
But like, what are you seeing out there? Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we do have one question here from Deborah. What's a good ground cover for weed suppression that's not your lawn? So if you want to take out a lawn, put in a ground cover.
But one that I really like is Pachysandria. I mean, I don't know that it takes a while to establish and get weed suppression going, but man, once it's established.
Yeah, you see a lot of that under trees planted a lot of time. You get a pretty heavy, dense
It's kind of a
planting.
shade ground cover.
Yeah. And Deborah, we also have a website on this too. We have a website on like every topic, but we have a ground covers website that's actually really good. You can go through, and I think you can filter by like sun or shade and see what might work. I like a bugleweed. A Juga reptans is a nice one. There's a lot of different cultivars you can pick from. Lamium, spotted dead nettles, another good one that has some flowers on it too. So there's definitely some that are more ornamental.
Yeah, wild ginger again.
Wild ginger. No, that's a good one.
Beautiful leaves.
That is a really good one.
Yeah.
I'm actually going back to some of the experimenting I'm doing this year. I'm experimenting with alternative lawns at a garden, and I'm doing micro clover, Dutch white clover, and creeping thyme to see how easy it is to, have an alternative lawn, because I would love to do a program on it, but I know nothing about it.
I have a really cool book.
I have a book
example, but it's more so like the book that I'm thinking of. It's more so landscaped. It's not necessarily just a mono kind of culture of a ground cover so much, but that's really cool. I'm curious to see how it turns out.
Yeah, so I do, I have seeded it so far. I do need to go through and do a tiny bit of weeding because, the weeds still did come up. And then I'm going to see how it comes back the following year. And hopefully I could share more information about that. But those ground covers you said were great.
Yeah, and just keep in mind that any ground cover, it's going to take a while to establish. So you're going to have to weed until it is kind of fully covered in there and it gets established. But once it is, then you should have pretty good coverage. Yeah. Awesome. Let's see. Anybody else? No, we've got, I think, 3 minutes left. So what else do we want to...
I pinched my basil plants today.
Yeah? So why do you pinch your basils?
I always start basil from seed, and you can still do it now, and you can do it throughout the summer, because if you plant a basil plant, it goes into flower sooner than if you plant basil seed. So then I go through and I pinch out the tips, and this is clearly my first harvest of basil. This is going in spaghetti tonight, of course, after I wash it. But I just went through and I pinched them back to a node, and we have our node is where the leaf meets the stems. So I went on the plant and I just pinched it back like this, and then all those other buds will start breaking. You'll get a more compact plant, and then you'll get your first harvest. And I have all these wonderful smelling basil leaves. And plus, when I seed, I always have to thin out a little bit, because once the leaves start touching each other, and I eat the thinnings, or I transplant them other places. So basil is my favorite herb, absolutely, hands down.
I've been smelling it this whole time I've been sitting here. It's very strong.
They smell good.
Strong, pungent basil.
Genovese is my favorite, but this is sweet basil, which is spicy. Basil's, herbs, I call herbs a gateway plant.
To what?
To growing other plants. Because they're so easy to grow. It's fun to use them. I don't want it to flower, so that the pinching out the tips does that, preventing it from flowering too. And it'll just keep producing all summer long.
I actually kind of like the pinching of the tips. It's therapeutic.
I love pinching and pruning. Yeah, deadheading. Yeah. Heidi asks, is that the Chelsea chop? I'm not familiar with that, Heidi. Is that I don't know.
Chelsea chop.
Chelsea chop. I don't know what that is. So
my gosh, we keep getting stumped today. I should
have
said that.
You're gonna have to tell us what that is, Heidi. If that's a technique of pinching,
the Chelsea where you just go chop.
That's a
I just chop the thyme and the oregano. But I don't always go back to a node because they're so small. But
We'll have to let us know, Heidi. Well, thank you, everyone, for your awesome questions today. We had some great seasonal stuff going on in the garden. That is awesome. I hope you join us again. We'll be back on in a couple of weeks, so take notes of things that you're seeing in the garden, different questions you have, and we will get those answered for you. We appreciate you all hopping on today.